Citroën CX vs Peugeot 505, a 1986 UK-Spec road test. The battle of French flair, float, and four-cylinder fortitude. If the 1980s taught us anything, it's that France wasn't merely producing baguettes, brie, and particularly complicated films, you know, the ones where a man stares meaningfully at a window for 20 minutes. It was also producing some of the most intriguing cars on European roads. And if there were two models that symbolized the French approach to motoring in 1986, they were the Citroën CX and the Peugeot 505. Both large cars, both family-friendly, both available with engines that ranged from modest to mildly worrying, and both determined to show the world that executive motoring did not have to be Germanic, square-jawed, and built like a filing cabinet. This road test pits the 1986 UK-Spec Citroën CX against the 1986 UK-Spec Peugeot 505. Think of it as a battle between two branches of the same slightly eccentric family, one floating serenely above road imperfections like a Technicolor hovercraft, and the other soldiering on with honest mechanical virtue and the sort of pragmatic charm only Peugeot ever really mastered. Together, they represent peak French car design before the 1990s arrived and everyone got distracted by airbags, electrics, and hot hatchbacks with insurance premiums that caused many a parent to faint. Let's begin. Styling drama vs dignity. The Citroën CX is unmistakably French, so unmistakably French, in fact, that parking one outside instantly raises your neighbor's collective eyebrow. Designed as the spiritual successor to the legendary DS, the CX looks like it was shaped inside a wind tunnel during a week of severe existential crisis. The long, tapering tail, the curving flanks, the sharply pointed nose, it all looks aerodynamic, purposeful, and slightly alien. Even now, 4 decades later, it still carries a certain Gallic elan, the sort of presence that suggests it knows something about the road that you don't. The Peugeot 505, meanwhile, is more restrained. Peugeot in the 1980s did not do drama, it did sensibility. The 505 looks conservative yet pleasant, angular but far from boxy, with clean lines and proportions that whisper rather than shout. It looks like the sort of car that a mid-level bank manager might have chosen after rejecting a Volvo on the grounds of wanting to appear a bit more fun without actually doing anything fun at all. But don't let the calm exterior fool you. The 505 has a certain rugged charm, and in estate form was practically a national institution in some corners of Europe. So, styling verdict. Citroën wins on drama, Peugeot wins on dignity. It is essentially a choice between wearing a silk scarf to Tesco or wearing a sensible cardigan with deep pockets. There is no wrong answer, but only one of them flaps magnificently in the wind. Interior quirk vs comfort. Citroën CX. Climbing into a CX is like stepping aboard a slightly retro-futuristic command module. The dashboard is a glorious affront to convention, with its rotating drum speedometer, satellite pods around the steering wheel, and a general layout that suggests someone designed it after reading a magazine on space exploration. Even the steering wheel is oddly single-spoked, a feature that polarized people in the 1980s and continues to do so today. Whether you think it's a symbol of engineering elegance or a deeply suspicious omission depends entirely on your relationship with geometry. The seats are soft, enveloping, and wonderfully French, you sink into them like a warm bath. Headroom and legroom are generous, and thanks to the famously thin door pillars, visibility is magnificent. When the high-drop pneumatic suspension rises on start-up, it only enhances the sensation of preparing for takeoff. Peugeot 505. The Peugeot 505 interior is far more conservative, but in a good way. It's a place where everything is exactly where you expect it to be. Large, clearly marked instrumentation. Logical controls. Seats that are firm yet comfortable, in the way that suggests long motorway trips were very much part of the brief. It lacks the CX's showmanship, but it immediately feels familiar and intuitive. Materials quality is decent for the era, approaching German seriousness without quite reaching German expense. The driving position is excellent, visibility is good, and the whole cabin gives off a sense of quiet practicality rather than flamboyant innovation. Interior verdict. If you want a car that feels different, distinctive, and mildly theatrical, the CX wins hands down. If you want something reassuring, ergonomic, and less likely to confuse relatives when you lend them the keys, the 505 is the safer bet. Engines and performance. French horses at work. For 1986 UK models, both cars came with a variety of four-cylinder petrol engines. To keep things comparable, let's consider their most common mid-range 2.0-litre units, sensible engines capable of both daily commuting and enthusiastic weekend jaunts without requiring a remortgage. Citroën CX 20/22 variants. The CX in these guises produced around 113–120 bhp depending on spec. Not earth-shattering, but enough to move its slippery shape with respectable vigor. The CX was always more about smoothness than brute force. It accelerates in a long, creamy surge, accompanied by the soft hum of tires and the whisper of aerodynamics doing their best to avoid unnecessary friction. Its 5-speed manual gearbox is adequate if occasionally a bit notchy, while the automatic option tends to blunt performance somewhat but adds to its limousine-like feel. Top speed sits just shy of 115 miles per hour in many versions, with 0–60 miles per hour achieved in 10–12 seconds depending on engine tune, wind direction, and whether the suspension felt like cooperating that day. Peugeot 505 2.0. The Peugeot's 2.0-litre unit typically produced around 105–110 bhp. It is slightly less powerful than the CX, but the 505 is also a touch lighter and feels more eager off the line. The engine note is more mechanical than silky, but it is lively, responsive, and uncomplicated. Tres Peugeot engines of the time were celebrated for. Performance figures put it slightly behind the CX at higher speeds, but in real-world driving it often feels more immediate, particularly around town and on winding B roads. The 5-speed manual gearbox is smooth and predictable, and the car rewards enthusiastic shifting. Performance verdict. The CX wins the motorway, the 505 wins the back roads. Both are adequate, neither is fast by modern standards, but each delivers its pace with charm. Ride and handling. The main event. Citroën CX. This is where the CX steps forward, flicks its fringe to one side, and clears its throat theatrically. The high-drop pneumatic suspension is not merely comfortable, it is otherworldly. The CX glides over bumps, potholes, and road imperfections with the same indifference that the French state occasionally treats EU regulations. It feels like riding on a pocket of compressed air, because, well, it essentially is. Body roll is more controlled than you'd expect, and the self-leveling system means the car remains poised regardless of passengers or luggage. High-speed stability is one of its greatest strengths. Few cars of its era track so calmly at motorway speeds. However, the Diravi steering, in some CX models, is an acquired taste. It self-centers aggressively and can feel strangely disconnected at low speed, though at high speed it offers impeccable stability. Once mastered, it becomes intuitive, but it does have a learning curve steeper than a Parisian underground staircase. Peugeot 505. The 505, in contrast, aims for honesty and balance. It has a conventional suspension setup, McPherson struts up front, a live axle or independent setup at the rear depending on version, and Peugeot tuned it beautifully. The ride is firm but compliant, comfortable without being floaty, and composed on uneven roads. It lacks the CX's magic carpet mystique, but it also avoids the CX's occasional hydraulic eccentricities. Handling is where the Peugeot claws back points. The steering is precise and natural, the chassis beautifully neutral, and the car feels poised when hustled. It communicates its limits clearly and handles enthusiastically when asked. Ride and handling verdict. Ride, Citroën CX, by a country mile. Handling, Peugeot 505, by a comfortable margin. Choosing between them is like choosing between a feather bed and a firm, supportive mattress, both excellent, neither wrong, and very much dependent on personal preference. Practicality, space, utility, and the real world. Citroën CX. The CX offers a large boot, huge cabin space, and a rear seating area capable of hosting a small diplomatic mission. However, the saloon boot opening is narrow due to the fastback styling, which occasionally leaves you performing cargo-based origami when loading larger items. Estate versions solve this problem magnificently, but in 1986 UK-Spec, the saloon remains the more common. Peugeot 505. The 505 shines in practicality. The boot is generously shaped, the opening wide, and the estate versions are legendary. Even the saloon has excellent cargo capacity and a sensibly shaped load area. Rear seat space is ample, headroom good, and overall the 505 simply feels more helpful during day-to-day duties. Practicality verdict. The 505 wins for pure usability. The CX wins for passengers who enjoy spacious travel while feeling like they're in a mid-budget science fiction film. But the 505 is the better workhorse. Running costs and maintenance, the elephant in the garage. Citroën CX. Here's where owning a CX becomes more of a lifestyle than a practical decision. The hydraulic system is marvelous, but it does occasionally require special attention, preferably by someone who understands hydraulic spheres and doesn't panic at the sight of bright green LHM fluid. Routine maintenance is otherwise manageable, but the car does reward owners who keep up with preventative care. Fuel consumption hovers around the high 20s miles per gallon for a well-maintained example. Peugeot 505. The 505 is straightforward, robust, and mechanically friendlier. Labor costs tend to be lower simply because everything is easy to access and conventional in design. Peugeot engines of the time are renowned for longevity, and parts availability is generally better. Fuel economy is similar to the CX, perhaps a whisker better depending on driving style. Running costs verdict. If you're retired and enjoy tinkering, the CX provides endless satisfaction. If you want simplicity and reliability, the 505 is the obvious winner. Driving experience, personality and pleasure. Citroën CX. Driving a CX is an event. Every journey feels like a gentle float across the countryside. The cabin isolates you from much of the outside world, the aerodynamics mean motorway noise is minimal, and the suspension turns rough roads into philosophical suggestions rather than actual physical events. It is elegant, serene, and slightly eccentric. You drive it for pleasure, for calmness, for the sheer charm of its engineering. You do not drive it if you are in a hurry, annoyed, or attempting to impress someone who thinks German engineering is the only engineering. Peugeot 505. The 505 is far more conventional, but also more energetic. It feels lighter on its feet, more responsive, and more eager to be involved in the act of driving. It rewards the driver, communicates clearly, and behaves consistently. It's the sort of car you take on a Sunday drive because you enjoy driving, not because you want to show off your automotive philosophy degree. Experience verdict. Two completely different personalities. The CX is sophistication and serenity, the 505 is balance and involvement. Conclusion: which one wins? Choosing a winner between the 1986 Citroën CX and the 1986 Peugeot 505 is like choosing between wine and cheese. You could pick one, but life is better with both. The Citroën CX is for those who want unmatched ride comfort, striking, unmistakable design, futuristic interior flair, a sense of drama and uniqueness, the feeling of floating above the mundane. The Peugeot 505 is for those who want dependable usability, excellent handling, simpler maintenance, traditional ergonomics, a durable, practical family saloon or estate. If your heart rules your head, choose the CX. If your head rules your head, choose the 505. Either way, you end up driving a French masterpiece from an era when manufacturers were unafraid to be bold, creative, and wonderfully eccentric.